I'm working on getting the images applied to my wood heart, and I've got this one started. I printed off these little blocks from my computer, scanned the hearts, and sized the images so that they would fit on each one, and then printed them out. And now I'm sealing the hearts and applying the image at the same time. So I'm putting a fair amount of matte medium onto these hearts. And also on the back side of the image. And while it's very wet, I'm putting it on and sort of holding it up to the light so that I can see how it's going to be oriented onto the heart. And then, ooh, sorry, very squeaky. And then I'll just let that dry and then trim away the excess. So now that these are dry, I can just trim away the excess. I'm just letting the edge of my scissors rest up against the wood. And following it around. And it's a little fiddly to get both sides of the dip in the center of the heart cut away neatly. So, cutting it as much as I can on the other side and then clipping it from the front to get that last little bit away. That's not too bad. And now that that's done, you take a little bit of matte medium. Oops. And go along the edges to make sure that the image doesn't lift when I go to gesso and paint. So I'm just kind of pushing a little bit of matte medium in along the edge to make sure that it's sealed. And I should probably mention that I sanded the heck out of these hearts before I started to make sure they're nice and smooth. My neighbors have a dog visiting today, and my two dogs are not happy about it. And my three neighbors' dogs on the other side are not happy about it either. There. So just let that dry, and then I can do a little gesso. I would usually cover these with some white gesso to sort of knock down the line work a little bit. But because these lines are so faint, like especially this one, it's very faint. I think that clear gesso is in order this time. So this is just like white gesso, except it's clear. And I know that some of you are probably thinking, what's the difference between clear gesso and the matte medium that I just used to apply these? And the answer to that is that like white gesso, this clear gesso is a paintable ground. So it has a little bit of tooth to it, which will grab the acrylics as I paint. Whereas the matte medium is generally a smoother surface, and the paint tends to slide a little bit when I apply it. So I always try to lay down a paintable ground as my first layer. So that makes me think that this gesso is the better choice than the matte medium. I do paint over matte medium pretty often, but it's not usually my choice for the first layer. So, and that is the tiniest amount of clear gesso that I probably could have applied. I'm doing very little because in my experience, this gesso is a little grittier than white gesso. It has more tooth than I'm usually happy with. So I don't want my finished pieces to feel gritty. So I'm only using a little bit. So now I can let this dry. So let's talk about gesso quickly. You're all probably familiar with this. This is the traditional white acrylic gesso. Comes out of the bottle white, goes on white. It's flatter and more opaque than most white acrylic paints. And the difference between this and paint is that this is designed as a surface preparation rather than something that you would use for a finished painting. It provides a ground that has a little tooth to it and gives a little grab to the paint. So when you paint against it, the pigment lays down easier and there's more grab to it. So that's what most people are talking about when they talk about gesso. This is black gesso in a bottle that exploded, so my friend gave it to me for free. Same thing as white gesso, except it's black. So if you want to start with a black background, or if you need a super dense black, you can lay in black gesso and then either paint over the top of it or use it as your primer and apply whatever media you want over the top of it. This is clear gesso, and that's what I used on these little goodies that I just painted. This is the same as white gesso, except it has no pigment. So it comes out of the bottle white, but it applies clear. So these have been gessoed clear, and I can feel that this piece now has a little bit of tooth to it. Clear gesso tends to be a little grittier than black or white gesso, so it might take a little extra surface preparation. I generally just take a paper towel and rub over the top a little bit to kind of knock down that grittiness. But in essence, these are all the same thing. They're primers designed to be worked over with paint or pastels or whatever. So you can use them interchangeably. It just depends on whether you need something that's opaque or something that's transparent.